The Rapaport group is doing something that's very interesting, and it's going to take this also a step further, and we're going to keep pushing this legitimacy issue. The idea here is I'm going to try to take a step back and look at the issue in a broader way than specifically PRAD or specifically this other project, the RJC projects with the chain of custody, and really try to get people to understand, what's going on in a bigger way. My little computer here is not really working very well. Maybe someone come up and help me, but let's see. First of all, this whole idea of ethical certification and everything relates to an issue called resource allocation. How do we allocate gold, oil, copper, minerals, diamonds? And you need to understand that international markets are competitive. There's no law out there where you're in an area where you're not in the United States, you're not in another country, you're dealing between countries. There's no real international law. There is some idea of international law, United Nations Security Council, and there's some things. But fundamentally, when you deal in countries, selling things to other countries, you're out in the open. It's all about competition. Who pays a higher price? And it's basically a capitalistic, laissez-faire model. You go into Africa, you take out money, you buy stuff. Regulations don't really work in a country where, say, 25% of the kids don't reach the age of 5. The diggers aren't going to be worried about mining laws. They're worried about what do we eat for dinner, how do I keep my children alive? So you're dealing in a very laissez-faire, and you have to understand this other issue. We'll talk about maybe the Kimberley process, but let's say you're an African country. Do you want a bunch of white people in Washington telling you who you can sell your diamonds to? You don't. Say you're Washington. Do you want some people in Africa telling the United States government who they can sell arms to? I don't think so. So this whole idea that you can have international law controlling everything in a nice little kumbaya way, it's bullshit. It doesn't work. Because in the real world, governments say, I want to control my destiny. I want to control who I buy from. I want to control who I sell from. You want to give me some USAID, fine, but no other government should tell me what I should do within my country, what I can sell and buy. And in fact, if you look into you'll see in a minute, the World Trade Organization, human rights is not part of the laws or the rules of the World Trade Organization rules. Not because they're not nice, it's because they realize you're never going to have a World Trade Organization if you incorporate human rights into it. The national sovereignty issues dominate any discussions about international law or international trade. Now, we're dealing here with this resource allocation, then we're dealing with transformation issues. What happens when you transfer or you transform rough diamonds into polished or gold into jewelry? How does this work? Who gets how much money? Now let's say you've got $5 billion and you're buying gold for a bunch of diggers who don't have $1 a day. What do you think those negotiations look like, eh? Do you think those diggers have a chance in a laissez-faire economic model? They're starving. They're literally starving. So there's a problem here in terms of wealth allocation and exploitation. And there's really no balance, one would think, except for the fact that consumers in a modern society are going to say, enough. No, I don't want that blood diamond. Is that true? Well, let's look. Nike was making sneakers, and they were cool. I mean, Nike is cool. Whenever you go down the street over here, you can see the Nike shop. They're very cool. Their sales went down over 50%. Their profits fell 57% when it was discovered that their employees or the workers were getting really screwed in Vietnam and in China. It just cost them money, real money. So there is a sensitivity among consumers that kind of tries to address how wealth allocation and exploitation work in the international world. But it's not based upon really so much laws, although there are laws in China and other places now. But I'm saying to you, these are the issues. How do we allocate resources? How much do we pay for them? It's an unlevel playing field, and it's a free market. Oh, wrong way. Now, you got to understand something else. There's about 100 million new middle-class consumers emerging in China and in India every year. And let's take the Pacific Basin as well. There's only 350 million Americans. These people are not going to go back to riding bicycles. They want oil. They want iron ore. They want copper. They want zinc. They even want your diamonds if you're an American retailer. And these guys are going to drive a new wave of economic expansion that will literally just blow you away. I mean, the Far East is going to light up like a Christmas tree. And they're going to want things. So all that birth rate, all those new consumers coming in, it's going to be like economic warfare. They're going to say, I want these resources. China wants the iron ore. China wants this. America wants it. You want it. Everybody wants stuff, and there's not that much stuff. Every year, another 100 million people wanting to buy a washing machine and a car and all the products that come with this, not to mention the pollution. So we're talking about economic warfare with currencies. We're talking about economic power here. And that's coming. It's a tidal wave that's coming, guys. So, we're talking about what is or what was and responsible practices. But I'm telling you, it's going to get worse from a global international level. And governments are going to be caught up in this, and they're going to have to fight for their own survival. I don't think, I love America, but I don't think America's going to say, we'll take a 5% hit on unemployment because we would like to have human rights taking place in Africa. I don't think so. We might, but, Harry Jackson, Scoop Jackson was a great guy. But I'm just saying to you, there are issues here. And so what we're looking at is a changing world, and we have to look at the other issue is global governance. Who controls international trade? How does it work? Sometimes there's treaties. United Nations Security Council controls the Kimberley process. Kimberley process is very nice, very good, and it does a lot of good things. I am not upset at the American Cancer Society for not curing AIDS. I'm really not. There was a war. The war stopped in Sierra Leone. And part of that reason was because the United Nations Security Council said, I'm going to implement an embargo, and Liberia could no longer buy their diamonds. The World Trade Organization is out there. Very important organization. No human rights there. And there is, but not really. NGOs try to do something. And you have like the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. So there are efforts being made to try to do things. But actually, when it comes to human rights, with the best of intentions, these guys are impotent. They're not evil, they just can't do it. Now, there's also instances of unilateral actions. The United States government says, no diamonds coming from the ZMDC, which is controlled by Mr. Mugabe in Zimbabwe. They say it's the national security of the United States. We're banning these goods. Today it's Syria, or it was Libya a couple hours ago, a couple of days ago. So there are unilateral actions, there are sanctions by different governments, EU. And there's this amazing thing called OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control of the U.S. government, that says, for example, and this is really what's weird about it, you can buy a diamond 100% legally from Zimbabwe with a Kimberley process certificate. As a matter of fact, about 125 million of those diamonds were sold within the last 2-3 weeks. And those diamonds come into India, and they're 100% legal and fine. No problem. But an American citizen that buys those diamonds, very bad. It's like you're dealing with Al-Qaeda. Really bad. You could go to jail, literally. And so the Office of Foreign Asset Control of the United States government says diamonds that originate with the ZMDC, even if it's sold to an Indian guy and he sells it to his cousin and then he sells it to some Jewish guy who sells it to you, you are still screwed. I'm not even talking about the ethical issues now. So we right now have a funny market which is bifurcated. Diamonds, well, it's more than some. Some diamonds which are bad altogether. Some diamonds which are good altogether. Some diamonds which are good in India and China and Russia, who will buy these diamonds, by the way. And some diamonds which you can't really legally import to the United States, and you can't import them to Europe. Now you can kind of cover it up and mix them up and, kind of hide them with the other diamonds, but realistically speaking, it's not cool. Funny. We live in a funny world, I never imagined we live in a world where some diamonds are legal in this jurisdiction and not legal in that jurisdiction. And this is not an issue of consumer from California wanting to be having their coffee. This is a legal issue. It's a compliance issue for big companies that have to do that. And if you get some NGOs making noises about new civil rights or new human rights abuses in Zimbabwe, and then the government's looking, you don't want to be on the wrong side of OFAC, I can assure you. Now, the Kimberley process, look, guys, it's done some good stuff. It's good. In some ways, there's bad stuff because it's not the Kimberley process's fault. You can't blame the Kimberley process for the fact that you have a bad guy called Mugabe who shoots his own people. It's not the Kimberley process's fault. You have ugly stuff about it because sometimes it says that Kimberley process diamonds are okay, so people buy them and they think that they're okay. So it's like a false indicator, and it crowds out other efforts. And that's why I'm so happy with the RJC saying in the position finally, we need a higher standard in the Kimberley process to stop human rights abuses. Fine, God bless them. So I think the way that the industry has to look at the KP and say, it's very nice, it's wonderful, but we need more. We need also to deal with human rights abuses and human rights violations, not just with conflicts and wars. So I'm not against KP. I don't think anyone should be against KP. We should just recognize its limitations and get on with our life, which is what I think the chain of custody is doing. We should recognize that governments cannot solve our problems. NGOs can't solve our problems. And we do have problems. And once we come to that recognition and understanding, we can address issues like the way that the RJC is addressing issues of the chain of custody. So what's the real game? The real game is the private sector. Governments can't do it, and NGOs can't do it. But the private sector, we, the diamond jewelry industry, we can do it. We can actually make the world a better place. So first of all, there's the moral issue. There's laws, and then there's ethical issues. And you know, ethics is often defined as something that transcends law. It's above law. Okay. So can you be ethical if you're the chairman of the board of a company? Not really. You can't give all your money away to charity. You got to go with the law because your shareholders want their money. They want to give charity, they can give charity. But if you were the chairman of Sterling, Zales, Tiffany, I don't know, Cartier, and someone came to you and said, we would like you to apply a standard above the law so that, you know, people in Africa are smiling. And you say, well, 1 minute here, you know. I'm running a company, I got to maximize my profits. If I don't cut these diamonds, someone else will cut these diamonds. They'll compete with me at lower prices, and I'll lose my market share. Let's say you're a diamond cutter in India, and you're sitting there, and you're cutting diamonds, and you have competitors, and you're both selling the same company in the United States who's very price sensitive. And you don't buy the merengue diamonds, and he does. He may put you out of business. And these workers are relying on you. They love you. You don't know the guy in Africa. You know the guy that works in your factory. So you have this problem of legal versus ethical, and where do you position yourself? Can you afford to be ethical? Is it ethical to be ethical if you really owe your responsibility to your shareholders? These are very interesting points when you actually apply stuff to the private sector where we live, which is the most important thing to do. Obviously, the deal is to create a situation where ethical, it pays to be ethical. Business issues. You know, there's reputational risk. It's not just altruistic. I'm saying governments, companies, they don't have a soul. You know, they dress them up like R2-D2 in the Star Wars movie. They're so cute, I'm a company, I have a little logo, you know. But these are companies owned for shareholders to make money. They don't have love and emotion, and they don't have ideas of necessarily being altruistic. But they can face business issues like reputational risk. So Tiffany will say, I'm not buying anything out of my supply chain that I can control because my customers will pay me a higher price if I can assure them that we know our supply chain. That makes sense. So in Tiffany's case, it pays to be ethical because they sell ethics as part of their packaged product along with the little funny box. So being ethical is a business proposition. And by the way, the more you brand, the more you're going to get whacked if your ethical issues are not in place. Because now you're a unified product. As we say, if you're not wearing pants, don't climb trees. So if you guys are out there with your brand, like Nike was, and you're not doing something okay, you know, it's not cool. And then the other idea here is demand development. And this, I think Matt referred to it, and I think this is probably the best idea. it pays to be ethical, because if you're ethical, you're going to meet a whole new bunch of demand. I mean, you'll see in a minute, I'll put up the slide. People want better products. How is your product different than his product? Oh, my product, it's got certification from the RJC. My product is an ethical product. My product's cool, and it's really, really great. It helps people. It's a fair trade product. Oh, okay, you're great. Look at Starbucks. They don't sell only fair trade coffee, but they have a glow effect. Whole Foods has a glow effect. Millions of new consumers in the United States of America are growing into this idea of social responsibility. You want to sell those people? You want to have a competitive, unique selling proposition, hopefully not too unique. But pity the jeweler across the street who says, I don't know where my diamonds come from, if you can stand up there and say that you do know. So what are we doing here? What is Rapaport doing? First of all, you have to understand that we had problems with this whole idea of ethical certification because we were afraid it would crowd out fair trade certification. Fair trade certification, in our view, and I think the NGO view, it's when you take the poorest people in the world, artisanal diggers, and you give them economic opportunity, microeconomic beneficiation at a grassroots level. In other words, you make it possible, sustainably possible for these diggers to make more than $1 a day, to be able to use the money that they're making from the diamonds to go into farming or fishing or whatever they're going to go into, and you bootstrap them up. That becomes fair trade. And we have a definition, fair wages and benefit to the community and do no harm and have auditing. But that is a higher level than, say, a diamond that comes out of Canada or a diamond that comes out of Botswana. It's also much more difficult to do. So we did not want to be in a position where the ethical stuff would knock out. I mean, a guy says, I want to buy a good diamond. He buys a Canadian diamond. What are the people in the Congo supposed to do? Starve to death? Which is why what the United States government is legitimizing those people so important in a new environment where there's going to be certificates flying around like I don't know what. So what about those guys? So we're worried about that. But what drove us to do the ethical certification was this problem that we have. On one hand, you want to promote good using certificates. Certificates are very powerful, as you'll see. So you wanted to make fair trade, fair trade, fair trade. Fair trade gold, fair trade diamonds. There is fair trade gold now, by the way, small amounts. But then we ran into this merengue situation with Zimbabwe. Evil. So you need to certify regular stuff, ethical stuff, so that you push back against the evil. Because if you allow everybody to mix the merengue diamonds with the regular diamonds, people are going to get killed in Zimbabwe. Women are going to get raped. People are going to be enslaved. That's the fact on the ground. So take into consideration that you need to fight evil, you got to have ethical certification for regular stuff, which I find myself well aligned with the RJC on the issue of their chain of custody. Still in all, we want to have a higher level of certificates too, which made us think of a rating system. So the idea here is to have certification, but not like an on-off switch. To have levels, like, you know, I have VVS, VVS, VS, D, E, F, G colors. What are our principles? Certify the product from source. You won't find a Rapaport ethical certificate in a product that we don't know where it came from, exactly where it came from, to whatever point it's certified at. Use existing standards if and only if possible. So we don't want to reinvent what the RJC has done, or what the Development Diamond Initiative does, or what the PRAD people do, or with other OECD people do. The idea isn't to create competing standards and start grading diamonds at 20x instead of 10x. The idea is to take the existing systems that work and to start to connect the dots, like the COC is doing, but maybe with a little bit of a different standard, a little different checking, etc., and to create a process that basically does a lot of the same of what the COC does, but in a slightly different way. The other idea is to ensure profitable sustainability for whatever we do. The worst thing in the world is to go into a developing country, throw out a bunch of money, have everybody jumping and doing something, then pull the money away and go on to the next country, and you left all these people standing there with no food to eat. That's not good. The only kind of development that works is, in my view, is sustainable work. Charity is evil in the context of development. Charity is good if people are starving to death, if they need certain medications, but in the normal way of, you would not do your kids' homework for them every day and then have them flunk out of school when they took a test. You're not helping your kid when you do their homework. You're not helping an African development country if you go in there and you give everybody an easy time and money and you create all these industries based on aid and you don't teach them how to fish or how to do things. And our real goal here is to create competitive, transparent, ethical markets. What I think is going to drive ethical behavior in the industry or ethical certification isn't going to be the goodwill necessarily or the lovey-doveyness or the kumbaya singing of trade organizations, although I encourage all those things. What's going to drive it is when a guy walks into a store and says, I would like to buy a fair trade diamond, I would like to buy an ethical product, and the guy in the store says, I don't have it. But the next store does, and he sees the back of the guy's head as the guy walks out to the next door. That competition is going to drive these markets. And don't underestimate the power of competition. It is the most amazing force of change in the universe. And it will work in this case, I'm quite certain. I'll explain to you why. I was going to take a look here. That's funny, I'm just going to dance around here. Almost done, only 10 slides. I just don't see where I was going to explain to you that the ethical competition. I'm sure we'll get to it. So I said before, by the way, is everybody with me? Talking too fast, making everybody crazy? I want to get done soon so we can have our discussion. When I talk about ethical grading of products, I talk about different standards. 10 was the highest standard, which would be fair trade. 9 is recycled, which could be questionable because, it may have come from a blood diamond 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Like, I guess recycled paper could have come from a rainforest. But basically, we find that to be. 8 is ethical, which means it's okay. Diamond's okay. 7 is unknown. I don't know. I don't know where the diamond came from. 6 is a problematic situation. Could be diamond came from a place that's not so good. Could be fighting in the area. Sanctioned diamonds is like the merengue diamonds today. And human rights violation, which is a definite negative. Probably most people won't be certifying with Rapaport, anything that's 7, maybe they'll do 7s, but they won't do less than 7. Like people don't certify fair or poor cut diamonds at the GIA. Now, let me just take a quick look here. It's there. I just want to make sure I can eventually explain this to you guys properly. Now, what is the ethical certification process? Not that different from what the RJC is working on. First of all, we want to make sure that we identify all the processes and the people that went into creating the product from raw material until it becomes a certified product. Mostly we're talking about polished diamonds from known sources at the very beginning, recycled gold from pawn shops or something, stuff that we know about. We're not going to go to the complicated areas. Pratt eventually gets us to the point where we can understand where those diamonds come from with some certainty, yes. But we're going to go for low-hanging fruit in the beginning. But we need to know where the stuff came from. If I don't know where the stuff came from, I'm not interested. And if the guy that we're dealing with is not someone that we would trust, then we're not going to deal with it either. Rate and audit the ethical status of all production processes. So you can't have a good diamond coming from a good place, but you don't have masks for your workers, and they're dying from the inhalation of diamond dust. That's not going to work. And here the RGC is great. You got RGC certification. That means you obviously have masks for your employees. You're being audited. God bless you. Yahoo. Why audit yourself again? Why would we ask for additional auditing if we know that, in fact, things are good? Confirm and audit all transformation processes and transition points to ensure certified product identity. I got to know it's the same diamond in that rough sale that turned into this polished. So in the transformation of rough to polished, we got to use the computers in the diamond factory that are used to make sure that people don't steal the diamonds to watch every time the diamond moved out of the safe in the production process. I got to know this polished came from that invoice or a group of invoices of rough diamonds. So it's an idea. It's not too complicated. I mean, a lot of other sources, this is not, we're not inventing this necessarily, but these are the big ideas. Identify the final certified product to enable reverse and progressive traceability. So I got to say, this diamond came from this factory, came from this mine, or this rough selling company. So you got to know what the product is. And when I say physically identify, I'm talking about a laser inscription on the diamond. Identification of the certificate number if we're doing certs. Maybe if we have a baggie of polished diamonds at some stage, a number on that baggie that's stamped with a number that we know we can pull onto the computer system and actually trace that stuff. Audit and randomly spot check the production and auditing process without prior notification. Don't trust anybody. Conduct independent third-party audits. Don't trust ourselves. How do I know what my guys in India are doing, in Surat are doing tomorrow? So we audit and they audit us, and it's got to be a locked-in situation. Communicate the ethical process and the limitations of the ethical certificate. Just be transparent. So that's the idea here. It's not vastly different than the chain of custody idea. They may have some slightly different standards. We may have some grading, but the idea is the industry is on the slope of legitimacy. We're moving towards creating products that you'll be able to look at and say, this product's okay because we know where it came from and it's going to be good. And that's the big message. That's the big point. Now, you may say this doesn't work. Let me prove it to you that it's going to work. First of all, it's voluntary. And it's an added value proposition. I'm not asking people to be ethical unless it pays to be ethical. I'm not asking people to be altruistic. I would like you to be altruistic, and I'd like you to be ethical, but I realize you have shareholders or cousins in the business with you who may not be so enamored with the idea of altruism. Utilize competitive market forces. Get people to kill each other, to fight with each other, to find ethical products because they want ethical products, like they want tennis bracelets or they want whatever it is. Now, how do I know this is going to work? Think back 3 years ago, 5 years ago. How many diamonds were cut to XXX standards? None, almost none. Few, Tiffany had something, maybe some other guy, Hearts of Fire had something. Vast majority of diamonds were cut to very good standards, not to excellent cut standards, because there was no excellent cut cert. Came up the American Gem Society, well before the GIA, introduced the 000, started to grab market share, competitive forces in the certification business. And it took a year or 2 or 3, and the GIA came up with an excellent cut. So now you got GIA XXXs, you got AGS 000s, and some, I don't know, 60, 70% of the diamonds that are sold into China are XXXs. Why? Because you have the certificate. You couldn't get a higher price without the certificate. A product is only as good as it says its certification once the certification scheme comes into big force. Anybody here want to buy a D-Flawless 1 carat without a GIA certificate? No way. You're not going to trust that it's a D-Flawless without a GIA. Who would make a D-Flawless? Where's the GIA? Okay. So you're going to get to the point here where consumers are going to start saying, hey, where's your certificate, man? You don't want to do it. You don't like the people that did this. You don't necessarily love the GA or the AGS or Rapaport for that matter. But it's competition that drives change. It's not kumbaya singing. It's not being nice. It's not being lovey-dovey. It's simply economic force. So if you align your economic forces right, it's a laser beam of change. This idea that a product is only as good as its certificate doesn't always take place. People in China or in India or in Saudi Arabia, I don't need any certificate. Just give me the biggest diamond you can. And I got news for you. I can't stop the Zimbabwean diamonds from being sold. I can cry, I can fast, I can scream, I can yell, I can curse. No one is throwing those diamonds in the toilet. Some guy in China will buy them. Some guy in Russia will buy them. Some guy in India will buy them. They'll smuggle them. You can't stop evil. You just can't. You can try to, but what you can do is you can take away the economic incentive for evil and you can replace it with an economic incentive for good. So what do I mean? If you can't get a higher price because you didn't buy the merengue diamond, and you can buy the merengue diamond cheaper than another diamond, then there's a business incentive. Buy the merengue diamond, mix it with the other diamonds, and increase your profits. But if now you can get a higher price if you don't have the merengue diamond in your mix, you say, oh, wait a minute. Should I buy these merengue diamonds and mix them? No. Why? I make more money. So we create an economic incentive for being good, like fair trade coffee. And that way you change the game and you create a better world and you create better demand and you meet the needs of the market. It's not a perfect solution, and I'm not that happy with the solution, but in my view, it's the only solution that's really going to be a force of change that can actually work in the current environment. So what's the conclusion here? Ethics is about money, everybody. Don't get confused. Ethics should be there because you're altruistic. I try to be altruistic, but I own my own company, and I have one shareholder, me and my wife, that's it. So I can afford to be ethical or altruistic, but most companies can't. If you want companies to be ethical, you bloody better well show them how they're going to make money by being ethical. Because money talks. You are responsible for what you buy. If you believe in karma, like the Jains do, I went to see the gurus when I was in Surat a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to them about doing ethical certification. You are responsible for what you buy. If you're a dealer, if you're a consumer, whoever you are, understand that principle. Society gets the level of ethics it's willing to pay for. No more and no less. That's it. It's just about money. It's about what you're willing to pay for. If your customers don't give a hoot and say, just show me a bigger diamond, I don't care if people got killed, I don't care about anything, don't bring up the subject for me, fine. It probably won't work. But I'm willing to bet my money on the fact that consumers, if they want a triple X, they want a better cut, they're going to want a better ethical diamond as well. Because if you really understand the story we heard today, this morning, about diamonds and about what people want and the idea behind the product, it's a no-brainer selling an ethical diamond. Whoops, went backwards instead of forwards. So when it comes to business, and I'm talking business here, I'm not coming to you to lecture you as a rabbi. I'm just talking simple, straight business. When it comes to business, it's not what you say that matters, with due respect to the NGOs, the government's doing something here. It's what you do. It's what you do. Thank you very much.